We're about to introduce another keynote, but before that, just to mention that they'll be joined by Matt Coleman a little bit later on, who's the Managing Director at Arrival, and they'll be part of another panel discussion. The subject, Cracking the Code, Blockchain Technology and Sport. Now, let me welcome our keynote speakers, the CEO and co-founder at Fuel Games, James Ferguson, along with the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder at Fuel Games, Robbie Ferguson. James and Robbie, part of Money in Sport 2018.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. I'm James, and this is Robbie, and together we have built Fuel Games, which is a company that is less than 1 year old because the technology in which it uses is less than 1 year old. But in that time, Fuel Games has been backed by the largest blockchain company in the world, Coinbase, as well as having advisors from the largest and most successful gaming companies in the world, like Zynga. So why is the time now for a technology like this to exist? Well, as we've been hearing today, the way which we consume entertainment has changed. And by we today, we're going to be focusing on the Gen Zs, and we have a real-life one of them here today with Robbie. So, the way in which we consume entertainment has completely changed because our worlds have become more digital. We expect our entertainment to be everywhere with us. We expect to be able to consume it through our phones. We expect to be able to consume it in whatever format is most digestible to us. And this means that now, sport, as one of the best forms of entertainment, has to compete in this new digital world. Our entertainment also needs to be social. We no longer want to just be watching the television by ourselves or even with just a couple of family members, but instead, we are competing with people watching video games where there are communities of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people interacting together in real time and having truly deep social experiences with their friends while they consume this entertainment. Finally, in this digital world, we want our content everywhere. We want it on every single device. So I remember a couple of years ago when I'd been away up the coast and I was completely out of internet access for 2 days. And then when I came back on the train and hopped off at Central Station, I was surrounded by hordes of 20-year-olds walking in packs with their phones out. And I wasn't sure what they were doing, and I could briefly glimpse their phones, and every single one of them was playing Pokemon Go. And within a couple of days, it had gone completely viral around the world. And that is because at any point in time, you could pull out your phone and play it. When Robbie watches sport, so the other day I watched him, he was watching the footy, and he doesn't just watch it, he has his laptop open at the same time and is placing bets. And at the same time, he has his phone out and is playing Fortnite. I don't even know if he's concentrating on it at all, but this is the way which the new digital generation interacts with their entertainment.
So probably most of you have heard of Fortnite. It's the fastest growing game ever in history. It made $3.5 billion since its launch less than a year ago. But what's most interesting is the way it's revolutionized the way that sport and other content can distribute their IP to an entirely new class of people who don't often engage in the same physical experiences as their normal audiences do. So earlier this year, they sort of set precedents by having a massive cross-promotion with Disney's Avengers, where you could play as the main bad guy in the film in the game. And recently, this month, they launched a partnership with the NFL, where you can play in the jerseys of every single one of their 32 teams in any number you choose. And what's so fundamentally revolutionary about this is that no longer are you selling products to people, you're getting them to sell it to themselves and their friends, because it's the social bragging element of wearing these jerseys in the game that is so interesting. People want to wear these jerseys because it's a cool thing to do, rather than having it sold to them at all, which is what's Super, super cool. And also, it's a really interesting parallel between the generations, right? You'd see older generations wearing the jerseys because it's something they're like happy and proud of and they want to support their teams. And then you see people who sort of conceptualize of their social identities in an online medium, the younger generations who don't have these physical contacts, and they're wearing the physical analogy of their jersey in the virtual avatar of themselves in these games. We've also seen the decline of traditional broadcasting, particularly among young people, because it's not enough just to watch a TV show. You have to be engaged with multiple different things at once. I'd like to think my attention span is slightly longer than 8 seconds, but apparently according to data it is. And so if that's the case, we need to be learning how to deliver content to these people in ways that's inherently social and viral. And how is that happening? Through streaming. This guy on the screen, Ninja, is on the front cover of ESPN. He is now a multi-millionaire this year thanks to Fortnite, and he has at any point in time 60,000 young people watching him sit at his computer at home, playing Fortnite and chatting with them as if they were sitting in the same room. Watching and co-participating in sports or esports is now a fundamentally social experience where this becomes the social home for many young people. And we've seen that brands that have realized this and gotten out ahead have taken all the rewards and reaped all the benefits. Games like FIFA, which launched essentially their IP into an online addictive experience, are making billions of dollars a year because they both A, adopted the social model, and B, leveraged the recognizability and importance of their real-world IP in an online context which fundamentally deepened that value chain.
Now, the thing is, humans haven't changed. Deep down, we all have the exact same drives we always have. But the technology around us has changed so much and is changing at an increasing pace that it means that in order to consume entertainment, we are doing it in different ways. And if you don't keep up with these different ways, then it's hard to stay competitive. No matter what, humans want to be social. They want to have meaningful and emotional interactions with their friends and with other people around the world who are passionate about the same things as them. Humans want to belong. We want to be able to feel affinity towards our sport or esport team. We want to be able to feel like we are part of something a little bit greater than ourselves. We want to be treated fairly. We want to be given authentic content, and if we're given authentic and valuable content, then we are willing to pay for it. But the new generation has no tolerance for anything less than fair treatment or authenticity. We want to know our stars. We want to be able to have sort of what we feel is a personal relationship with them and be able to engage with their content and their brand. And finally, what this means is that in this new world where we can have all of this, we want to be deeply engaged, and we want this at all times. We want to own content that was part of history at one point. We want to be able to participate tangibly in sports and esports. And we now expect to be able to do all of this at the touch of a button because of the devices we have in our pocket.
So we have a problem. We have the physical world, which has a few properties that are intrinsic within it. You have the possibility of real value. You have the possibility of scarcity. If I have a baseball that's been signed by a famous player, there are probably a limited number of those things in existence, and they have a certain value. That value might go up over time. That value might go up if that player dies, because no longer can these things be created. In the digital realm, we have an entirely different perspective. We have content that is constantly updatable, available on demand, incredibly addictive, and can be socially and virally shared with an arbitrary amount of people rather than the amount of people that can fit into a physical stadium. So we have the possibility of real value, and we have massive entertainment and engagement. How can we cross over these Venn diagrams? Activate intellectual property to create digital experiences with valuable items. And this is something that FIFA and other games have done very successfully, but it's not quite there yet either. Because what do valuable items really need? They need possessibility. They need tradability. They need to be a social item that can be shared or bragged or shown off. And they need to have some sort of rarity. They need to be scarce in some fundamental way. If you can create 1 million digital baseball cards that have all been signed by some famous player, none of them are special, because the very definition of a signature is that it's been demarcated or touched by something significant. It has a place in history. And so they have status because of that. You can remember, this baseball was picked up at this match. This jersey was signed by this player in this particular year.
And now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, yes, this is interesting technological trends, but what does this have to do with blockchain? Previously, it has been impossible to provide any of these benefits in the digital context before blockchain. What does that mean? Within the last 12 months, we've seen the emergence of non-fungible tokens. I'm sure when people hear the word blockchain, they probably think of either your mind goes blank or you think of something like Bitcoin. But the fundamental technology behind having a distributed ledger can be used to create digital merchandise that has real and astonishing value. Essentially, blockchain means that digital items can be unique and scarce. So, earlier this year, there was a game which was launched called CryptoKitties, and it was built off the back of a couple of technological advancements in blockchain and built a standard called the non-fungible token. And when applied to digital items, that means that you can have essentially different cats, which is what their game was, which all have different histories. They're completely separate from one another. They're more than just ones and zeros, which are held on a server somewhere, but they were also provably scarce.
So the significance here is that in every other single moment of history up until now, up until digital ideas could exist, up until things could be held on a server and you could own an item on a server, there was never ownership. If you own an item in a video game, you don't actually own that item, you're licensed access to it by the publisher. And at any time, they can create infinite copies of that item, rendering yours valueless. They can take it away from you, or they can change the properties of that item to make it far less valuable. And it's not just video games, it's every single kind of digital asset which could potentially exist. Whether that's representations of a house on a real estate market, or whether it's the tokenization of royalty licenses for music or sports. And for the first time, you can own it with the same property guarantees that you can of a real-world item, thanks to decentralization. So it means that not only is it tradable, but it's fundamentally irrevocable. It can be never taken away from you, nor changed, nor destroyed, because once it's given to you, it is no longer owned by the third party who created the server. It's stored across millions of computers across the world. So on the screen, you can see an example of how this can apply to a digital context. Maybe some of you have ever played Magic the Gathering, which was a trading card game where you could battle other people with cards, but there was also a totally collectible aspect to it. And the funny thing is, this game started in the 80s, and 40 years later, the market capitalization of these cards is $20 billion. And there's real value and scarcity associated with them. The most valuable card in the set sold for $82,000 US just this year. It's insane.
Now, blockchain means that digital merchandise can now be rare and provably so. So, up on the screen, we have an example of a digital blockchain card, much like a baseball card or something else, or a Magic the Gathering card, that sold earlier this year for roughly 90,000 Australian dollars, because this card is one of a kind. And then, if you end up with Ninja or a streamer using that card in a world championship, its value multiplies even further. So you can just imagine you have a digital item, maybe it's the Ronaldo jersey in FIFA, and perhaps it's one of only 10 of this special edition Ronaldo jersey, and on top of that, maybe it was played by Ronaldo the very last weekend. He was playing FIFA and used that exact jersey, and then we can sell that on the second-hand market. And it means that you get the most intense, loyal fans ever. Now, we leveraged this technology to create an esport from scratch, Gods Unchained. That card that sold for $90,000 earlier this year was actually our card, a one-of-a-kind card. It is currently the most profitable game to ever launch on the blockchain, making millions and millions of dollars and growing. And it has the most fanatic followers out of any game because these fans actually own their items. So it's in their best interest for the game to become even more popular. On top of that, the willingness to pay, even at this Generation Z and millennial level of audience, is insane. Our game has the highest CLV of any game ever because rather than just putting money in as an expense into these games and buying something which is essentially valueless, you are buying something which is valuable, which has history, which has scarcity.
The coolest thing is that we did this without IP. So the possibilities for people who do have IP are endless because there's already value embedded within these concepts, within these semiotics, within the characters and imagery and sports stars that we know every day. And the ability to tokenize them and create a real physical economy with all the convenience of a digital context is immense.
Now, we were so excited when we were invited here today to talk about money in sport because we think that the opportunity for the holders of sports IP, licenses, and brands is absolutely immense. At the same time, the threat is immense, the threat of esports, the threat of video games. But by taking advantage of this new technology, you can finally pull into place the things which have always existed in the physical realm. We can keep fulfilling the values which our players always want, which is that of sociability, that of accessing true value, and we can bring it into the digital realm to take advantage of all of the benefits that that offers. So we're very happy to be here today. It's been a pleasure to present, and if you guys have any questions, then we're very excited by that because for pretty much every single sport and type of IP, we have very exciting ideas about how something similar to what we've done with our game, Gods Unchained, could be applied to create a really valuable and authentic digital experience. Thank you.
James Ferguson and Robbie Ferguson, and they'll be in the Telstra Lounge, I dare say, a little bit later on. Now it's time for that panel. Please welcome the moderator this afternoon, or this morning. It'll be the last one before lunch. The Managing Director from Arrival, Matt Coleman. Matt, it's all yours. Once again, cracking the code, blockchain technology and sport, and the discussion to be moderated by the Managing Director of Arrival, Matt Coleman.
Theo, would you like to come up? Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everybody. What a great presentation. Put your hands together for these guys, please. Really well articulated, and we do have a bunch of questions. But before we get there, some of you may have saw Theo come up on the stage before. I'll get him to introduce himself first. But I just wanted to give you a bit of background on what we're doing. This is more of an emerging technology blockchain panel for the next 25 odd minutes. Could I just get some slides up? There's 3 or 4 slides I just want to run through before we get crack into this. So last year we've been working on, and this is a project that I'm involved in, it's emerging tech, it's using augmented reality, and it's about holding your phone up when you're at a live game and it streams live stats. If I can just get the clicker. So the guys just did a great review of the disruption. We're talking about, millennials aren't watching TV. There are multiple points of access. We don't need to go into that anymore. But, and I think this morning was talking about, the actual athletes are more powerful, potentially, than the media. So things are changed. So this is what we're doing. You're basically holding your phone up, and we have, through a partnership with Sport Radar in the US, live NBA and NFL stats streaming live through your phone. This is actually in test mode and launching next year. And we have a launch with the Arena Football League on the East Coast of America. For Arena Football is basically a smaller half-court version of the NFL. And here's an example, rugby league. So you can then predict the next move of the game, move the ball, win points, win prizes, and maybe we should integrate your player cards. Integration of brands and advertising, and this is simply holding your phone up for 30 seconds to 1 minute with mini micro moment games throughout the stoppages in play of any game, basically. Now, further than this, you can actually place a bet. We've been inundated with sports betting companies wanting to use new ways of getting to that other generation, and this is a new way. So we're simply, across the whole industry, the way we work, we get the data, we visualize it, there's player imagery rights going back to the sports codes, we introduce brands, and then the broadcasters can take advantage of this, they can drive this, we can integrate this and white label this into their apps, and the leagues as well. That's it for us. I'm going to take a seat and I'm going to move it over to Theo. Theo, you were one of the top 10 influential LinkedIn business people in the last 3 or 4 years. How many followers do you have?
Well, on LinkedIn, I was definitely an early adopter. I'd come from a commercial marketing background, which was probably more traditional. And I embraced LinkedIn as a way of, I saw it more like a toy to contact people all over the world that had similar values or similar industries. And I was an early adopter, so my current sort of following on LinkedIn, because it does have caps, so who's actually on LinkedIn here? Put your hand up. I'm currently sitting on about 30,000. That's the cap on LinkedIn, which has been developed from the early days. There are people who are on a different period of LinkedIn, which was called the Godfather phase of LinkedIn, and they've got hundreds of thousands. But if you connect today, the maximum you can have is 30,000 people individually connected to your LinkedIn profile. And LinkedIn has other tools now that can actually let you gain bigger audiences like LinkedIn groups and so forth. But yeah, it is a bit limiting, and that's why I like to hang out with the Facebook and Instagram kids, because you can actually, there's no limit there.
Well, the reason I wanted to lead in on that, I mean, you're a sports marketing consultant. Maybe just give us, 20 seconds on who you've worked with in the past. And the reason why I'm just getting to this, because Theo's going to have a quick chat around the blockchain influencer program that he's working on at the moment. I'd love to get your guys' feedback, and we'll come back to you in a minute. But over to you. Yeah.
Well, look, just in the essence of time, our company works with global brands. In particular, we have developed a good relationship with football, but we are doing other sports. And we also work through the whole level of international brands, national brands that are across the major leagues in Australia. But we also work with second and third tier, which sometimes gets forgotten. And some of the cool stuff that the Ferguson brothers have shown. You are brothers, right? Just wanted to make sure you weren't just cousins or so forth. But second and third tier sports are also offering opportunities for this technology, because they don't always have the funds, but the technology is actually getting a little bit cheaper, and they can actually start to play in this space. So I was going to ask these guys how much it costs to do that game, but maybe their investors will probably tell me a bit later. Was it a very expensive game to build?
So a top quality video game right now, like Fortnite, probably costs about $50 million.
That's pretty cheap.
And sort of a cheaper game like the one we've made is about 10% or a little bit less than that.
Okay, so
Just on that, now that you've taken over the moderation of the panel.
sorry, I had to ask that question because it looks so cool up there.
No, actually, but while you're on that, I mean, how many, was it 100 million players on Fortnite? Like, last year or this year or more?
So I think there's a couple of games which have cracked the 100 million mark. Fortnite and Hearthstone are the two which come to mind for me. And the interesting thing about Fortnite in particular is that it's not just played on one console or at a PC or just on your phone, but it's every single one of those devices. It doesn't really matter what you're on. You can play with any friend on any device. So now, from what I'm told, at lunchtime in sort of school, the kids will sit down and all play Fortnite together, which is their form of playing rugby or whatever that we used to do.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that disruptive question. It was just on my mind. I had to ask the question. I'm really sorry about that. But just coming back to your other question about what our group is working on at the moment, what I'm finding exciting with some of the stuff that was just mentioned is that for the first time you've got athletes, individual who are basically large influencers, sometimes bigger than their own club or smaller, it just varies. But if you take, for example, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, which was mentioned up there, they're always looking for more opportunities to harness that footprint that they've developed digitally, and there are more opportunities to monetize. So coming back to Matt's question, one of the projects we're working on is called Athenia blockchain, and that will provide an opportunity for these athletes to start to play in this whole space of, I just like to call it digital currency. Athletes sort of controlling their own money in a way, offering opportunities to their fan base, which is different to what they're offering at the moment. And blockchain's actually helping reduce security issues and other things which have been problematic with a lot of loyalty type programs or incentive programs, which sometimes don't always deliver what they say. But athletes will actually be able to give something back to their fan base, which they can also trade on the platform. They will also be able to address some other common issues that are out there. And that takes the athletes into a slightly different space to what they've been used to, because everything's been very media driven, but we're at a money in sport conference, and how do the athletes who have got a limited time actually generate other opportunities? So Athenia is the first step of sort of connecting these dots and making it interesting for people who have large audiences. So, you know, on national TV, someone like Karl Stefanovic, he may not be a sports person, he's a TV personality, but he has credibility, he has a footprint which can be monetized across the world, because people might like him in another part of the world. But with sports athletes, they are global. Some of these guys are global. So for example, in Australia, we have someone like Andrew Bogut. He's playing basketball here, he's returned home, 13 years in the NBA, one of the top draft picks across the whole NCAA when he launched. He's got an enormous footprint. How can he actually monetize or commercialize that? Does he go and talk to the Ferguson brothers to come up with a game that involves Andrew and the Sydney Kings or the NBL, or maybe the NBA historically? This is where it gets very, very interesting, because these athletes now have a real opportunity to really galvanize, not just for today while they're actually active in their sport, but further on. And also, there's a historical record that these guys have got, which is quite interesting from a content perspective. And I think that sort of heritage, sort of going into memorabilia, is going to get very interesting. In the US, I don't know if you guys follow baseball, but there's a famous player called Babe Ruth. Now, one of his cards in the real world, which the boys mentioned, is actually worth a lot more than, you know, one of the current superstars of the Major League Baseball. And his cards are still trading at the highest rate of any major NBL player. And he hasn't been around for a long time. So this stuff that we've got up here is actually going to stay around for a long time, and that'll continue to generate royalties and other commercial opportunities for someone that's not active, not around. And there's also an exchange going on in a traditional sense, but now this whole virtual, digital sort of sense as well.
So just getting, you guys were talking about the business model before and pricing and all that sort of stuff. Let's just talk about security for a moment and why people should actually have a listen to what blockchain is, because a lot of people just really think that blockchain's in the financial instrument. It's a smart contract that can't be broken, can't be hacked. But, you know, for what you were just saying as well, it actually is an imprint for security of your ownership. I mean, I was actually, has anyone played Sharknado out there? It's this crazy movie that sharks actually drop out of the sky. It's a comedy, but actually the sharks eat people. Now, I was watching this in America one day and I thought, what the hell is this? And then I played the game. They tried to sell me a sword, I think it was, in the game so I could hack up a shark for nearly $1,000. And I'm not kidding you. That game, these games are just out of control. And I think that's why, sports and fan engagement is under pressure. It's these new technologies can really assist. But just getting back into your business model, I mean, you guys made $1 million, I believe, from your first game, and you've just raised $2.5 million from Silicon Valley based VCs. I mean, what was the real key in the business model? Was it just selling the amount of cards? I mean, on average, what did they sell for?
So when you have provable scarcity with something, whether it's a digital item like a blockchain card or whether it's a physical card, you're going to have copies of those cards which are worth 50 cents each or less even. And at the same time, you're going to have Babe Ruths, which are selling for many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So for us, most of the cards which we've sold are for people to play with and also brag to their friends about, and they normally are worth a few dollars each. And players will spend a couple of $100 collecting lots of different cards. I think where it gets interesting, though, is you mentioned before security. So it's very interesting that we've had Babe Ruth brought up as an example because a couple of years ago, maybe it was about a decade ago, there was a forged Babe Ruth card that actually sold for about $400,000. And it was a complete forgery, but it had been ranked as a perfect 10 by some of the sort of external ranking agencies. Now, on the blockchain, this is impossible to do by design. You know what each item is, you know its provenance, who's had it before, exactly what it was sold for. It's all open and transparent by design, as you would expect something which needs the security of an actual currency to have. But now you can apply it to actual items. So what might this look like in sort of a sports context? You could have a game like FIFA where you can buy costumes and skins for your characters. Maybe it's a special edition jersey, and you can prove that you are only ever issuing 1,000 of this jersey, or you are only ever giving this digital jersey for FIFA out to people who attend the World Cup at this particular stadium. And at that point, it can provably never be faked, never be minted again. And then when they're used in that game, in the game, you can also know who played it before. So it could be, maybe you have David Beckham, who has played his own character in FIFA and then sells that off. And this is a brand new way that athletes themselves can start creating new merchandise out of nothing while still offering something valuable because it's something which is limited and scarce. And then that person can brag to their friends at lunchtime when they have their phone out, oh yes, I have the David Beckham limited edition jersey. There's only 50 of them. And on top of that, David Beckham played with this in his house or on TV 2 weeks ago, and then I bought it off David Beckham's specific store for this. So I think that the opportunities there which blockchain brings are pretty incredible.
Can I just ask, going back to the NFL license IP that they put in Fortnite, I mean, I know you just only touched on that, but I mean, this is a real world example with the biggest game in the world. You got 100 million fans. NFL fantasy sports have got 60 million players in America right now. NFL's huge, obviously, right? Let's talk, there's all the big numbers there. But tell us how and what the business model is behind that for everybody in the audience, because that will really tell them how big this opportunity is.
Yeah, I think it's completely positive sum, which is really interesting. So I think it's completely positive sum addition in a similar way to the Disney one. So you probably don't see too much crossover between the under 20s and purchasing real world memorabilia in the NFL. But suddenly when you digitize it and make it this awesome cosmetic you wear in Fortnite, it's really cool. So on the Fortnite side of the deal, it makes complete sense. You have people seeing awesome IP, which virtue signals that it's still a successful and refreshed game because you have the biggest sports organization in America doing a cross-promotion with it. And on the NFL side, you have the exact same thing, which is you're tapping into an audience that is probably not your exact demographic, that is now suddenly positioned to see this as really cool. The really powerful method of distribution here is that you have a bunch of streamers who are all people whom Fortnite players respect and look up to, and the subculture is defined by what they say is cool. And so when Ninja purchases one of these jerseys and talks about how it's actually the jersey of his favorite NFL player, he's suddenly set in these kids' minds what is cool in sport, and they're probably going to go and check out that sport overall. So I think it's a really powerful and really ongoing connection because they're going to be playing with that cosmetic on their virtual avatar for days on end.
Okay, thanks for that. So who would agree that this is an interesting area? And has anyone got a wallet? Does anyone have any Bitcoin or any Ethereum, or is blockchain a little foreign? It is to most people. So, I'd really encourage you guys to Google this during the week. And just another couple of really interesting things that have hit the press in the last year, which you may have heard, but Havas Sports basically came out, and they're now rewarding fans by sharing social media experiences or whatever it might be in cryptocurrency. So that's happening right now worldwide. You may have read about the Kodak collaboration. So Kodak has also collaborated with a blockchain company, and what that enables consumers to do at sports events in particular is to upload their content at a live match, and then they've got the opportunity to monetize that on the actual blockchain. So basically they sign up, they open up a digital wallet, and if someone wants to buy at their certain price, it's all secure. They make a payment, and Kodak takes a small slice. So this is over the next, we're talking 2 to 10 years. This is really coming at us fast. They're predicting that this market globally in the next 3 to 4 years is going to hit about $60 billion in revenue. So that's a big number to look at. Theo, have you got any more thoughts? I know we're towards the end here. I don't know whether we've got any questions, but we'll keep going. How does the brand fit in your influencer model exactly? You're talking about that before. I mean, are you saying that you were talking about the fans are rewarded as well, right? So
That's right. Under this current project that you guys are sort of getting a bit of a sneak peek, which is launching next year, the Athenia blockchain platform will actually provide these new interactive opportunities where fans that are following the LeBrons and whoever it is at the time can really start to monetize unique I guess digital merchandise, if I want to use that term. I think the boys would probably have a cooler way of pronouncing that, but I'll just use digital merchandise at the moment. Most people know memorabilia. You guys have probably got garages full of memorabilia. Well, I prefer the digital concept because it's a little bit more space saving, and I know my wife probably prefers less space on memorabilia and so forth. But it's really simple. I mean, we are in a different environment. So the 10-year-old, the 20-year-old, even the 30-year-old and beyond are going to be looking for these other ways of monetizing merchandise or memorabilia or experiences or thoughts and so forth. So what we're trying to do is to simplify it using blockchain as a way of creating that security around the whole system, and making it very engaging for fans. So if Cristiano Ronaldo does a scissor kick, that can be captured, a bit like your Kodak experience. There's only X amount of that available. It's scarce, as the boys said, and here it goes. It's going to take off. And we had an experience with Tim Cahill, where one of our partners, UBW, he was at a game where in the FFA Cup Grand Final in Melbourne, where he scored a great goal. He sat at the top of this, lucky for us, an A-frame. The branding came up, and that went around the world. But the problem, that was probably about 40 million or something like that, some statistic that we had, the final metrics. But there was no way to capture this thing that we're talking about right now. If we had a blockchain-fueled type product to capture that moment, because Tim's followed around the world, it would have been fantastic. So I think that's the next step. Blockchain is an enabler to make this a reality, things that we've thought about, but actually now putting it into a commercial context. And I'm waiting for the different games that the boys are going to develop for the mainstream codes, and possibly some clubs that are here at the moment, because I know my son's going to love that.
So, any final comments from you guys? What are your final comments about the future of the industry outside of what you've developed? How big is this? What the reaction from Silicon Valley? I mean, how big is this?
In terms of blockchain generally, most of Silicon Valley, all the top-level investors, believe that it's going to sort of be everywhere, in the same way that every single website you go to now is HTTPS rather than HTTP. This will just be sort of the technology which underpins the transfer of value in the future. How does that sort of relate to opportunities about making money in sport, I guess, is something which is great to end on. And when we have a look at the term digital merchandising, which I actually do quite like.
Oh, thanks.
We can see that when you buy merchandise, it's a way to sort of show your status and your loyalty as a fan. And we can see now that with blockchain, there's not just new ways of creating this merchandise, which has zero cost of goods sold as well, which is sort of has remarkable economics. You can create something that valuable with zero cost of goods sold. But it means that you can create merchandise at each level and then have the creators of that merchandise and the owners of that merchandise then be the ambassadors for that merchandise and the brand, because it is possessible, it is tradable, and it is valuable. So you can have people show in the same way that getting a green tick on Twitter or a blue tick on Twitter or on Instagram next to your name is, for Gen Z and for a lot of people, an incredibly valuable status symbol. You can now commoditize this status in the digital context and then apply it to sports fans as a way of signifying their level of fandom and the fact that they own this digital item which was owned by a particular player or was issued by a certain brand.
So the cool example is that you can give owners equity share in co-branded assets in a fully decentralized manner. So for an example, I could create a set of soccer cards for Ronaldo, and I could say that 30% of all the revenue that ever accrues from the sale of those cards on the blockchain, or even from the secondary market fees, which could be huge over the next 100 years, can go directly to him, and he can do anything he likes with that. So that creates incentives for him to sell that. But also, you can use those assets for real utility, not just collectability. Maybe owning one of the rarest assets gives you a 5-minute chat with him, authenticated every month or so. So really, the possibilities are endless when you can give people true possession of digital goods.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Just on parting, I was looking at a hotel. This was one of the first projects I've seen selling tokens I think it's got the Ritz in Aspen, right? Ski resort. It's worth $220 million, only 20 rooms. They sold $20 million worth of tokens to sophisticated investors that could sign up. And when I say sophisticated investors, you basically had to have your proof of identity and read their contracts and then deposit the money. So you can now fractionalize real estate with blockchain. Now, people might say, why on earth are you doing this? Because A, you could only be a venture capitalist or someone out in New York with a lot of money to buy the hotel in Aspen. But now things are being fractionalized, and blockchain enables you to do that, and it gives you the secure contract to process all that. So, look, one of our sponsors for Money and Sport event is the London Football Exchange. I don't know whether you've seen that at the top of the logos. And they're out to do this with the leagues and the teams and the players. So, this is happening. Look, I hope you all enjoyed that. And it's a new light. We're all still learning about the project, and so the blockchain's got a long way to go. So thanks very much for your time. Thanks, guys.
Looking at sport through a different lens. Thank you, Matt Coleman, and also thank you very much to both James and Robbie Ferguson and Theo Fotopoulos.